Hello, welcome everyone. We're gonna get started. So if people would like to come in and fill in, there's some chairs in front here. Join us for the conversation. I'm Molly Gibson. I'm an origination partner here at Flagship, and I'm so excited to see you all here today and welcome you to our celebration of International Women and Girls in Science Day. This is our 5th year celebrating this event and an occasion, and bringing people together across the ecosystem to make new connections within and across our companies. Tonight, we are honored to be joined by Angela Hwang. She's the CEO of Metaphore, Biotechnologies, and CEO partner of Flagship Pioneering, for a conversation about her leadership journey as a biopharma executive, from her time at Pfizer, including as Chief Commercial Officer and President of the Global Biopharmaceuticals business, to taking the helm here at Flagship, founded Metaphore Biotechnologies. Angela will be joined by Christine Heenan, Flagship's Executive Partner of Executive Operations, for the discussion. After the conversation, you'll see discussion topics around the room at these tables. If you have a topic of particular interest in contributing to or learning more about, please join the group for that area. The topics will be incorporating AI ML tools into your work, building and scaling pioneering companies, recruiting top talent, empowering the next generation of women leaders, effective communication, and the art of negotiation, self-advocacy. There are discussion leaders to kick off each conversation, so please join the tables after the conversation, and join me in welcoming Angela and Christine to the stage.
Thank you, Molly, and thank you, everyone. It always feels like a holiday to me when we have this event every year, because it is so energizing to reach out and see a sea of faces from so many flagship companies and so many stages of one's professional journey, which we're going to talk about tonight. I'm going to do my best in a voice that's still recovering from the flu to have a conversation that is going to, I hope, feel as intimate as possible between me and Angela and, 225 of you all. In that I have a number of questions, and I could talk to Angela from a flight from here to Singapore, but I want to hear from you throughout the conversation. Don't feel the need to hold your question. If we're talking about something that you have a burning question or a comment that you want to share, shoot your hand up. We'll make sure that a mic is brought over to you, and we'll have a dialogue, all of us, as we go. All right? Sound good? Angela?
Yes.
You started your journey in South Africa. Tell us about your earliest memories and your childhood in the country. It was at a time when apartheid was still in place. So tell us about your start in South Africa.
Well, first of all, Christine, thank you for having me here. And hi to everyone at Flagship, Metaphore, my Metaphore colleagues right here. And it's a wonderful day to be celebrating women and all of us in science. And I'm thrilled to be here to share whatever I can about my own personal journey and what I've learned, my lessons learned. But as you said, Christine, yes, it's not obvious that someone like me would be from South Africa. You don't look at me and think, oh gosh, she must be from South Africa. But actually, my mother is a first-generation South African, and so that's why that's where I grew up, that's where I was raised, and I was raised during a very interesting time of apartheid. And for those of you who may or may not know, but in the time of apartheid, what that meant was that if you were not white, then you belonged to a different class of people with very different rights. So as an example, I couldn't go to public school. Like the school that was down the street from my house was not accessible to me. I couldn't take public transportation. We couldn't live in certain areas. There were areas designated for whites, and there were areas designated for non-whites. And so while that may sound, harsh and really challenging, and yes, it was, but actually in the way that I grew up in my life, my parents did not. I lived a life where I didn't know that at all, because what I realized afterwards was that everything that we had to do, or we had to do in order to have a somewhat normal life, was all of a workaround, right? You can't go to school here, So where can you go to school? As it turns out, there was a school 4 hours away from my house. It happened to be a boarding school where I could go to school. So that's where I went to school. So I ended up having an incredible education. I don't feel like I missed out on anything, but in order to be able to do all of those things, everything was a workaround.
How old were you when you realized the workaround was just a part of your daily life and a part of how your family was navigating, getting you opportunity?
I don't think I realized that until I actually came here to America, because I think it was taking myself out of that environment of the everyday of what that was like, and the environment that I was working in, which was highly, discriminatory and sort of pitted people, like sort of like the haves versus the have-nots.
That part you were conscious of.
I was very conscious of that, because actually there was a moment when I was actually at work one day, and an incident happened at work that really was very profound for me. And it was that very day, I still remember the day when I said, I cannot live here anymore, I have to go. And when you then leave.
How old were you when you left?
I was 25. So I was, ready, had worked.
A quarter of your, of your life.
In quite a while. But I think I realized the workarounds when I left, because I remember being at Cornell, and I realized that I had actually never walked anywhere. You can't walk anywhere in South Africa because it's dangerous. So there was an aspect of how you live that was very different.
But normalized.
But like so normal that I could just walk out of my apartment, not even lock the door, and walk to school, and then come back, and everything would be fine. Or that I could go to school here with everyone else, and I did not have to apply for any special authorization or permission to go to Cornell. Like, that was an unusual event, because I had to go through a lot of hoops in order to get to university. But then when I got to Cornell and in Ithaca, the fact that I could just integrate into this environment and nobody was wondering who I was, where I lived, all of that, that's when I realized, wow, it was really different.
Yeah.
And then I had to unlearn a lot of habits, or sort of had to deprogram myself away from fears that I had that I didn't even know. I was anxious about certain things because that's your normal environment. But then once, I could feel like as the year went by and the years went by, this whole, that you go through, because you realize that you're just living in an environment that's very different, that's inclusive. The classrooms that we were in, we were expected to participate. Like, there was none such a thing where I was. And the fact that you could learn to speak up, like I had never done that before, ever. So there were vast differences, but the appreciation of the differences, I really don't think I appreciated the magnitude of it until I actually was out of that environment. And then it became a big wow for me, that wow, I could live this way, that things are different, that people can come together and not ever have to or should even be mocking one another when you're together. There are things like that were like kind of okay in my old environment that are definitely not okay here. And to feel that and to learn that and then to be able to have the freedom to live in it meant a lot to me.
Take us forward from Cornell to the next chapter.
So, like everyone, graduate, you look for a job, and I ended up in New York City in a consulting firm. And it was in that consulting firm that I had consulted for Pfizer. And so, 3-4 years into my consulting job, then Pfizer calls me and said, hey, come on over. And I just really wasn't sure that I should be going to big pharma, at that time. Just because I think while I was doing the consulting work, I could feel the bigness of this company. I could feel the hierarchies. I could feel just how bureaucratic and processy it was. And it was very different from the environment that I was in, where we're just everyday problem solving and being agile. But I did eventually make the switch. And it was very.
Your first role at Pfizer
was in strategy. So I was in the strategy department in what we called corporate strategic planning and policy at the time. Pfizer was actually not a pure pharma company. We had devices, we had chemicals, we had animal health. We had a whole bunch of things. So one of the first jobs that I had to do was be part of a team to assess the divestiture of all of this. Like, did we want to be pure pharma or not? So the answer was yes, we were going to be pure pharma. And so we divested a number of these companies, and along with that was the acquisition of Warner Lambert. That was our first big, anchor acquisition in making us a pure pharma company.
Were you part of the decision around the acquisition or the integration team around the acquisition?
I was part of, I would say, the team that, I guess the upfront to do the analysis to say that this would be a good thing for us to do. And so, and then we pulled it off. And then subsequent to that, as all of you know, Pfizer then did, was on a tear of acquisitions. So we did Upjohn, we did King. I mean, it just went on and on. And Big Wyeth was a big seminal moment in our acquisition journey because it got us into vaccines, which we were not in before, and a number of other really interesting categories.
And as Pfizer was sort of acquiring, you went from being an analyst, evaluating, to roles of increasing responsibility.
So actually, it was after the Warner Lambert acquisition that I looked at this new organization of ours and I said, how could I be at Pfizer and not work as an operator, be in the business and touch these amazing products like Lipitor, right? We had so many amazing Lipitor. I mean, I didn't quite work on Viagra, but that was another famous one. There was Celebrex, and we could go on and on with all the blockbusters that we had. Lyrica was one that I worked on. But I think it was that moment when I decided to get off the consulting track or the internal consulting track and actually be an operator.
Let's just pause on that, because a decision to go from what you're rocking, you're doing well, you could do well forever, to something that is appealing but new and untested. It's a really important moment in a leadership journey, a crucible moment. Were you looking around and saying, I can do this better than that guy or that gal? Or were you saying, I'm ready for my next challenge? Were you saying, if I ever want to be this, I have to next be this? What was the nudge for you?
Interestingly, I've never been one to say, I want to be that, and let me plot my way to get there. I've always been someone who says, I need to learn something different. And the more different I can be and the more I can learn, like that is my differentiation. And so I'm a natural sponge anyway, and so I think naturally I'm wired to being in different environments and being in challenging environments. And so when I looked at where we were at that moment in Pfizer, it was that, yep, I could do this consulting thing, it's really great, but actually what I really want to know is how can I run a product? How do I make $5 billion for a brand? Like, no idea what to do. So it was actually a very tough decision because number one, back in the day, Pfizer was even tougher than what it is now, and they demoted me because they said, you don't have any marketing experience, like go to the bottom again. So, but I did because I felt that that gave me the greatest chance to learn something. So back to the, I'm not so title conscious, I'm more focused on what am I gonna do and what am I gonna learn.
I think that in itself is such an important, there are references to careers often not being ladders, but jungle gyms, where you go across or over or down before you go up. And your willingness to say, go ahead, start me at the bottom because I need to learn these things and go up from there. That must have been, you had to think about that.
I had to think about it. And it was also the day-to-day was hard. Like imagine you thinking about the biggest problems for this giant, like multi-divisional corporation, not just pharma, but animal health, devices, all of the above. And now I'm like, well, what color should this, this ad be? And so like just the range of issues and the strategic, range was like a whole different order of magnitude. However, I think patience and determination with really learning the trade, like to want to be really good at this and to learn the nuts and bolts of what it takes to be an amazing marketer actually then stood me well, because in the long run, all this stuff pays off, right?
While on your quest to become an amazing marketer, did you need to go deeper on the science behind the drugs you were marketing, or did that come later?
You always have to know the science behind your drugs because you have to be able to market that, right? That's what we're marketing. the mechanism of action, where your efficacy, where is it better. You have to then manage the side effects, right? Because you have to, work with your competitors. So I think the science part is obviously not as deep as what it is here, but everyone who works in pharma really needs to love science of some sort and has to be comfortable with it, because that is what you're selling in the end.
Within Pfizer or outside Pfizer, did you have, like, phone a friend, like, I just got into this meeting about cytokines, tell me again? Or did you have discussions about your career path? Did you have mentors? Did you have advisors? Who was your support mechanism on that journey?
I think I grew up in the day of Pfizer, where it was the survival of the fittest. And so there were no mentors, there were no friends, there were no buddies, there were no systems. It was just, like, off you go and have a good time. See ya in 30 years, that kind of thing. But I mean, that was just how we were. We just weren't set up that way. However, what I did have was a cadre of incredible managers and incredible colleagues that I had met along the way, because we're so team-oriented. Like, we work in giant teams all day long. So you learn to not be, there's no heroes, there's no individual heroes. Like, my work is only as good as I can make somebody else good, and vice versa. And so it was in these giant teams that we worked that I found my tribe, my people, my confidants. And they come from all, across the company, HR, legal, finance, not just the brand people. And so I really credit the way that we work at Pfizer and this team orientation in teaching me and all of us how to work across lines, right? Different functions, how we can all have different bosses, but we can still have one singular goal and work towards that goal. How we respect one another as colleagues, and we can debate things, that we can, have different expertise, but how we all come together as one team to solve problems. And my entire 30 years looked like that. It was just being in the team constantly. And so I think that, when you are in that sort of situation and you're working so closely with people, you naturally form bonds with people that aren't just in your immediate team. They are from everywhere in the company, and that is what really helped me, because when I had eventually, let's just say, I remember a time when I had just taken over a team that was very broken. It was very, very hard. And I didn't necessarily have, like, who was I gonna call, but I could call on my friends from HR, other team leaders who had led challenging teams, like just a very broad set of people. So I would say that has been my approach. I don't have one mentor. I have a whole crew of people that I call on for whatever the needs are. And so when I was getting up to speed with Metaphore, I had my science crew, I had my biologics crew. You have just different groups of people that you can go to. But I think it says a lot. Maybe the lesson here is about building networks of people that are close to you, that you admire and you respect, and that you sustain those relationships through time, because you don't know when you're going to need them. But one day you will, and when you do, they're going to be there for you, because this has been something that you have nurtured for a really long time.
One of the table topics after our discussion and dialogue, I hope, I'm looking for hands, will be around knowing your worth and negotiating along those ways as you ascended in larger teams and difficult teams, and over here, and running divisions and running larger divisions. Did you negotiate? Did you say, that sounds good, this sounds better, or that sounds good, but here's the terms under which I'll do it? Or
Rarely. Most often, I mean, actually, I came out of a 28-year, almost 30-year career not even really having a resume, sadly. Because it just doesn't work that way, right? I mean, you get your next job through doing your present job really, really well. And that then opens you up to a pool of opportunities. So people come after you and they say, oh, hey, I have this. But more often than not, the company decides, because it's headquarters, they'll say, I need you to do this, so please can you do it? And I rarely, maybe once or twice, but maybe really only once did I say, no, thank you. Most times You take one for the team because we're a team-based organization, we're a company-based, and mostly I looked for opportunities where I could grow. I really did.
Well, and that's sort of part of the implicit compact for you, right? You're going to do this harder job and you're going to grow as a result. But is there any part of you that would go back and talk to your 30-year-old self or your 35-year-old self and say, you should have asked for more or done this differently? Or would you have done it just the way you did it?
Honestly, I just don't even, they were such seminal jobs that I took that felt like when I took them, I had no idea how impactful they were. And I could not have rewritten the story in any other way. I mean, honestly, there were at least 10 times that I was tempted to leave Pfizer along the way. So maybe the one lesson I did learn was that there is a time to leave and there's a time to stay. And when is that is it's a big decision. But for me, what I learned along the way was that I was going to stay as long as it took for me to be great at this, that I can walk away from this job saying that I mastered it and I was great, because then I can look to the next thing without any regret. And I can definitely say that I achieved that every single time. Like, I walked away with nothing unfinished every time.
And so, all right, I'm great at this. I'm going to go on to do this. I'm going to do this till I'm great at this. Sounds like pretty strong internal confidence. Was there ever a point in your career that you had imposter syndrome, or what if I fail at this, or they've asked me to do this, but I might not be good enough to do it?
Every time. Because every time that they gave me something, it was most times things that I didn't know what they were, had not done before, or they were big, audacious, scary goals. So every single time, I thought, oh, what am I going to do? What am I doing now? Why am I putting myself through this once again? So the confidence was gained, Christine, not at entry. It was the mastery of it along the way and demonstrable results with a track record of repeated success, right? It's not a one-hit wonder. And then I realized after a while that I was a bit of a junkie, that I kind of liked that. So I was looking for it. Like, if there was something that was easy to do, I don't think that's mine. But I'm grateful, and maybe this is another lesson and piece of advice, is that, these discomforts that you feel are a natural process for learning. Like, if it isn't uncomfortable enough, you maybe haven't put yourself out there enough, and that maybe you haven't touched the boundaries of what's possible. And there have been a great number of times in some of my jobs at Pfizer where I really felt that going in, where I go, I don't know, I can do this. But then you realize you can figure it out. And then when you look back, you realize, gosh, if I had given up earlier, or if I had not thought about it this way, what would have happened?
I remember being in a job and
what were your examples?
Well, I would just say in this particular case that you just said, I remember being in a situation when I was at Harvard University, and I must have been wearing my sense of overwhelm on my face, and a colleague of mine, the general counsel, said, this job will always be hard. It won't always be hard and new. And I remember thinking, okay, all right, this isn't just hard I'm reacting to, this is hard and new. And when it's not new, it may still be hard, but I can do hard. It's just anyway, it's just interesting, those things that give you a sense of, this is a moment that I can find my way through. I want to ask, because somewhere along the way, as you ascended at Pfizer, you also got married and had children, and many women here are at career stages where you think, I've got to figure out a way to manage my ambition and opportunity on the career track, my family, sometimes a growing family. How did that all unfold for you?
Well, in the same way that I looked at my jobs, which is, I can't do it. I remember after my son was born, my second child, I don't know how I arrived at this day, but I was saying, I don't think I can go back. And then I said to myself, okay, this is destiny. If I find myself a nanny that I trust, then I'll go back. If I don't, then I won't. I was just leaving it up to fate. And as
Tell us all the nanny we need to thank for the fact that you're now at Metaphore.
So, she was amazing. Talk about women. Talk about women in your lives that are there to support you, and the village that we build around us. This is exactly what happened. My nanny at my son's birth, stayed with us for 11 years. Then after she did, her cousin stayed with us for another 3 years. And then after we had this entire family with us. So my children have been fortunate to be in this community of a family for their entire lives. But I couldn't have done this job without Maria, number one, and her cousin was also Maria. Maria, number two, is what my son called her, my kids. But I could not have done this. And so I think that was something I learned along the way as well, is to ask for help. It's okay. It's okay to be vulnerable. It's okay to say, I can't do it, because I literally couldn't. I mean, I was not even in the country to do it. So, you know, the ability to just like trust that there are people around you who will be there for you and who you can entrust your children to, including the teachers at school. Like, you literally build this entire community of people around you that helped me.
You do. I mean, I think that's something worth exploring, because it's clear from what you've described in your leadership journey that you have enrolled people to be on your team, invested in your success, feel part of what you're trying to accomplish. But that's not necessarily obvious to everyone, and as a playbook or as an impulse in how to interact with colleagues, or with people who help support your children, all those things. What is it, if you could sort of think about how your approach allows you to say, gosh, come on this journey with me, we'll do this thing together?
Desperation as well. I mean, honestly, I think I thought a lot about maybe two things. It's one, your hunger to learn more things at work, and your love for your children and your desire to create this environment for them. And you know how people say, can you really have both? And the truth is no, you can. I mean, I cannot have both. I had each one of those at different times, but did they ever come together perfectly? Never, right? So I think what I learned was that there's a time and place for everything, and that if I didn't control the situation so much, and I kind of just let life go as it's supposed to go, and the problem-solving part, like how can I figure this out for this week, and this for next week, and that for the following week, and 3 weeks from now I'm going to China for 3 weeks, so what do I need? You just have this big, giant program that you have to put together.
I remember getting the advice once that it's not work-life balance we should seek, but work-life harmony. That's a matter of figuring out how all these pieces, sometime you're going to miss the basketball game, sometime you're going to miss the big presentation. You're just trying to figure out a harmony and a rhythm that allows you to feel you're doing it well enough at all the pieces that you're managing.
Yeah.
So you have 30 years is a long time at one company. You got great, you went on to the next thing. You got great, you went on to the next thing. At some point, you said, it is time to leave.
That's right.
And I'm going to take on an early stage biotech.
That's right.
Walk us through that decision.
Well, I think that's what it was. My learning gene kicked in again, and I was saying to myself it was around year 26, and 10 other opportunities prior to that to leave along the way. And I said to myself, is this how I want to spend the next 8 years of my life? Like, I'm going to retire and roll my chair out of here. And what more am I learning? Or what more do I think I can learn? And how much is that? Are you always learning? Mm-hmm. It's just about how much, right? You can't say that at Pfizer you're not learning. I mean, every day you're bombarded with things. And so it was about how much and what kind of learning. And I think that's what hit me, because, I also, for those of you who don't know, launched the COVID vaccine. Like, I was there on the day when we weren't doing it. Then I was there on the day when we decided to do it. And then I was there on the day 248 days exactly later when we submitted our file to the FDA. And a few days later after that, our planes took off and delivered the vaccine to
Can we just take a minute and... I'm forgetting, you had a Pfizer term that was like Operation Warp Speed.
It was called Project Lightspeed.
Project Lightspeed.
And doing the impossible, making the impossible possible. But also, I just also want to congratulate Flagship and Moderna. I always said you are a worthy competitor, because it was really that hard to pull this off. It was really, really hard. But I think that was the turning moment for me, was that I lived like a year doing this, and then 2 years dealing with, the contracts and everything else that, ensued from that. And what you realize is when you have this like life-changing moment of having a mission that is so profound and so singular and so focused, that going back to normal life and saying, oh, let's just reorganize 10,000 people here, and let's just cut another $1 billion here, and then let's, all of that is all really important, but I started to struggle with the purpose of like, where's that going and what does that really mean? And so I think it was just a big, huge personal moment of reflection, and not even a moment, a whole 2 years of reflection when I said to myself, I'm such a learner. If I think about where I've been and how I've always been, which is I've been driven by learning, and I've been driven by, new adventures, and am I really being true to myself? And the truth was, after COVID, I wasn't. And so then it became just a point, it became about, okay, well, what is this new adventure? And so I went down 5 million paths, back to my network of people, right? All the people that I know who then introduced me to more people. I kid you not, if I met 500, 600, 700 people this last year, that would be not so unordinary. But this is where your networks work for you, because they open you to more networks. And you start learning about a whole new world, or worlds out there that I just never spent any time because I didn't have to learn about them. So I'm truly grateful for the people that I met, perfect strangers that became friends, things that I did that I never would have imagined doing because I didn't put myself there to do it. And you realize that that is an important learning as well in your career journey, and that no matter how old you are and wherever you are in your life, that you still deserve to learn and you still deserve an adventure.
You were talking earlier about you were never a person who said, by 30, I'm going to be here, and so I'm going to do this, this, and this, and by 40, I'm going to be here. I'm going to go out on a limb and say you are the kind of person who built the extraordinary network you had, not by consciously building a network, but working in a collaborative way, being open to people and ideas, and helping where you can, and finding all of a sudden along the way you have a surround of people inside your company, outside your company, who know you, who know what you're good at, who want to help you, who you know what they're good at.
Oh yeah, 100%. I think it's just, we can all go through maybe the same activity, but your intention and your purpose could be very different. And so that then makes you approach it in a very different way. Like mine was from a place of curiosity and learning, and I was just open-minded, like a sponge about everything. But people love that too, right? People love to tell you what they're good at, what they want to teach you. And so there's immediately this sort of chemistry and this engagement, because it's not just about me. I'm actually telling them to spill everything that they know. And so they love it too.
Yeah.
Right?
All right, let's take some questions from the audience. I know there are probably lots of them. I hope there are lots of them. Here's a hand here. Amanda Kay. It's so nice to see so many leaders of our CEOs, CSOs, male allies. It's great. And then we have another question over there next.
Angela, thank you for that advice and all that insight. I think one question that came to me was, as you kind of have put yourself in new situations, you talked about what you had to unlearn, what you got to learn. Is there anything you're unlearning or learning as you go from Pfizer to Metaphore, a big pharma to a small company? And do you think there are lessons there for us to learn from?
Well, for sure, our environments are different, right? You come from a place where there's just, I'll tell you one of the biggest differences is, like, I could turn up at work on a Monday at Pfizer and have no plan, and my life would just be taken up by all the things that are going on, because there are 5 million activities that are going on. And so you get swept up, right, by the machine. And the unlearning is, there's no machine here. Like, I have to be the machine and create the machine with my leadership team. Like, we have to make the machine. So that's one of the things that I have to remember, that the momentum is created by the people that are here and that we're working with. And my leadership team and all the people at Metaphor, like, we have to be the ones who create the momentum. It isn't gonna happen naturally. Like, my calendar isn't filling up by itself, whereas it used to without me. Mm-hmm. And I used to spend the day asking, like, who are all these people? Why am I meeting them? Like, that ain't happening here. And so that's one thing, Amanda, which is, how do you put yourself in a place where, how do you channel your energy in a different way, in a way where you still have to build a team, we still need to build a strategy, but how you do it and how you engage everyone in doing it is one thing. I think another thing is just, I'm cognizant of the fact that I might be actually speaking a different language. I might be using words that people don't understand, expressions that don't have any meaning. I'm cognizant of that. So I'm saying, I don't know if you notice it, but I go, am I making any sense? This isn't making any sense. Because I want to make sure that if I'm using words that are not used here, that there's a language that I also, and it's not just about people learning to speak my language, it's about me learning others' languages. So I think those are just a couple of things. It's this self-awareness that you are in a different place, that what made you great in the old place, there are some things you do, there are some things that are super, super leverageable and very, very, I think, applicable. But you have to, what's different is the context. What's same is the principles, what's different is the context.
That's really a very useful principles versus context. We had a second question here, and then Emily.
Awesome. Angela, I think what you said about finding confidants really resonated. And I think it's something we pride ourselves out at Flagship, whether that be through more formal networks or informal networks. But you mentioned that a lot of that was due to the ways that you worked cross teams at Pfizer. And so as you've gotten to know both the ecosystem and Metaphore over the last few months, I'm curious if you have any advice for particularly mid-career women on how to engage and really foster those relationships within Flagship.
Yeah, I think, well, first of all, I'm just beginning to meet everyone here at Flagship. Here's one right here, Christine, Lovisa, Amanda. You have just amazing, amazing colleagues and women and people that are here. And so, number one, I couldn't be happier that I am here and that I get to continue to feed myself, my intellect, but also my personal growth through incredible women who are role models, in their own right. And so I think that's one. If anything, there's one thing that I've said to myself, which is there are so many more people I need to meet. I just don't know when and how, because there's so much going on with Metaphore right now that I need to spend the time with this team. But maybe my advice is, or what I'm saying to myself is, I have to be intentional about it. It isn't going to happen by itself. I have to go and say, hey, do you want to have lunch with me? Hey, can I talk to you about something? And every day I think about at least 10 people I want to talk to, but I just, right now can't get to all of them. And so, I guess what I'm psyched about is that I'm going to have a long list, and this is going to go on for a while, my learning of Flagship and my relationship building with people. But it takes repeated interactions, it takes give and take, it takes taking an actual interest in someone else and engaging, for that relationship to build. Earlier today, up in Metaphore, we were talking about paying it forward. And I think that that's really something that we all have to think about, and as an important lesson learned, which is, as humans, we all want something. We all need something, right? It's not about want, it's about need. We need to learn, we need to, we get inspiration from others, but equally, we need to remember to give back. And so with everything that we give, and with everything that we want and we take, is I think an important sort of reminder to us that we also need to give. So this paying it forward to others, being there for someone else when they need advice, and putting yourself out there to go and advocate for someone, or to go and whatever it is, on behalf of someone else, or speaking up for someone else. Those are ways that you can engage people, because they see that you care and they see that you understand them and where they're coming from, or even better, you have shared values.
Great. Catherine?
I have a question related to some of that advice you were just talking about. And so thank you for sharing your career journey with us. And earlier in your career, what was the most valuable or most meaningful advice that you received from your colleagues or your mentors? And what was the impact that had on you and your career?
Yeah. I remember the very first time that I managed my first big job managing a team, so this was now, multiple hundreds of people on this team meaning, the people that reported to me directly, the entire sales force of this particular, brand, and so on and so forth. And I remember having to go on stage to give my first, speech and welcome, to this team. And I was really, really nervous. And I remember saying to my boss, you know what, I just don't feel like I'm a good public speaker. All of our sales managers, which, they're all, many of them were just, athletic humor or sports humor, and I'm the worst. I can't even tell the difference between certain teams and sports. And so I said,
I'm not going to ask you about Sunday night. We won't even ask you what happened. It's all good.
I did watch Sunday night. But I remember saying to him, like, how am I going to turn up? Like, how am I going to be funny? Or how am I going to relate, to this huge group of, like, sales reps and sales managers? And I remember him saying to me, just be yourself. Mm-hmm. Just be authentic. Like, you have your own special brand of humor, of relationship building, and of engaging with people. And so don't worry about what everyone else is doing. Just worry about what you want to do and create that brand and that new brand for yourself. And I remember that day so much because going on stage, a huge stage. I don't know if anyone has been to any Pfizer meetings, but there was a time when we had like 10,000 people in front of us. I mean, it was very audacious and scary. And taking that lesson of not trying to be someone else, but just being who you are and doing it in the most authentic way so that people can really see who you are and feel who you are all the way on the stage. Like, that was something that really resonated with me and was a big lesson learned.
And stays with you to this day, obviously.
It stays with me because it's about connecting with people at the end. We all connect in different ways, so find your way of doing it. And it can be different.
I remember getting hired into a job where...
Well,
the person I was hired, one of the people in the pool of candidates was an internal person and male and older than me. So this person was now going to have to decide to be on my team or not. And I remember thinking about this meeting, and oh my gosh, and he's been here forever, and he's older, and someone saying, the people who put you in this job probably knew what they were doing. Just remember that. And thinking like, okay, that's a really good, I didn't put myself here by myself, right? Other people evaluated options and made a decision. I'm just going to show up as me, like you say. Yeah. There's another question? Caroline?
Hi. As someone working to grow in their career, as I imagine it's the case for every single woman here, what do you think is the most significant barrier to women in leadership?
I think, it's a really great question. Honestly, I think deep inside, let me speak for myself, and then let me speak for the people that I have mentored. I think that sometimes we're our own worst enemy because we second guess whether we can do the job. We second guess whether we should apply for it. Are we qualified? And most times we're overqualified, and it's this sort of like voice in your head that often holds you back. And I say that because, number one, I've done it myself over and over again. And then secondly, I've mentored, just hundreds of women throughout my entire career where they would come to me. They were obviously the most qualified candidate, and yet they didn't see themselves that way. And I think I just feel lucky that I had all these years and all this time to really see how people see themselves versus how the world sees them. And that was a big lesson to myself, first of all, but also then to encourage and to help them to apply and to, in fact, dive in. And oftentimes, it was some of the personal stuff, Christine, that we talked about, which is, gosh, I have 2 kids, and they're just in nursery school. I don't think I can handle it. And I had my own personal experiences, right or wrong, to share about how I managed it. But I'm not thinking that's the only one, but I think that is definitely one, and it's a big one. And I have visibly had to, just mosey people along and say, do it, you will love it, I promise you, try it. That explicitly to get them to get many women to really dive in.
I just building on that, I think women are so often so loath to disappoint. And I'm afraid if I take this on, and what if I'm not good enough, or if what I'm not, and the prospect of disappointing people or letting people down can govern a sense of qualification and readiness, as opposed to, wait a minute, would I rather me be on this team really? So I think that notion of how do you tune down the voices in your head that say, but what if this happens, or what if you're not that, and what if, and turn up the voices that say, what appeals to you about this? What makes you think you'd be great at this? You know, I remember reading about men and women looking at resumes and men saying like, yeah, if I have 4 of these qualifications out of the 6, I'm qualified. And women saying I have 5.5 of the 6, so probably I shouldn't apply. And I have 2 sons. And my second son, he was applying for a job out of college, and I looked at his resume, and I said, fluent in Spanish. What the heck are you talking about? He said, I went to the University of Miami. You should hear me in an Uber, Mom. I'm like, oh, for the love of God. I'm going to tell that story 100 times to a woman who says, well, I don't know, I'm conversational in French, and I did, take a degree at Sorbonne, but I wouldn't say fluent. I'm like, oh, yes, you're saying fluent. So I do think, I agree with the point very much that Angela made about women needing to turn up those voices of confidence. But I also think it's worth just mentioning, in answer to your question about barriers, there remain structural barriers for women. And we are in a sector that is more male-based, generally speaking. I always love this event so much because it's proof of the fact that that's changing. I love how many mid-career women at Flagship have husbands who have careers that are oriented around school pickup or supporting their things so they can support their rock star wives in their leadership journey. But, I think, and we're in a weird moment in our country and our world around what I think had become an explicit understanding of the importance of diversity and equality. So I don't want to minimize the barriers that are structural and societal, but I do think one of the upsides of being a woman in a sector in which you're a minority is you're more likely to have the Angelas or the Amandas or the Lovisas say, I'm going to put a dinner together for the fact that you were just hired because you needed to have a posse around you from day one. Or I'm going to make sure to take that time, Emily, and have that conversation about career pathing because I want to make sure that someone in finance who's female has this opportunity to reach the highest pinnacle of what your ability and ambition allows. So I think there is an upside to being in an environment where other women around you are really attuned to wanting to see you succeed.
That's the pay it forward.
Paying it forward,
right?
Absolutely.
Idea.
Question here?
I mean, leaning onto the same similar questions as been asked before, how has been being in a leadership role as you are, and especially a lot of leadership are very male-dominated, were there any challenges that you have faced across your career and even now versus like if there were, how did you or how are you facing them and trying to resolve them, being a woman in such a leadership role? And if there's any suggestions or advice that you would give to other women too. Thank you.
I mean, as I was not even just sort of climbing the ladder at Pfizer, I mean, still when you get to the top of the ladder, it's still very male-dominated, right? So probably what changed for me was my ability to navigate that, to not feel uncomfortable. Like I would, I remember days I'd walk into a room and I'd look around and be like, what? And you may immediately feel, just more reserved because you feel like I am literally the minority in every way. So I think it's that consciousness and that self-awareness through time and a ton of practice every single day, every meeting, every years and years and years of practice that get you to stop looking at the room in terms of are they male or female and start focusing on the room in terms of what are we talking about here today and how can I contribute. And so, but that, by the way, it takes practice, so that's the learning. It doesn't just come and it's mega uncomfortable. Like I don't generally like to speak up unless I have to, but I've had to learn to speak up in order to drive change and to make things happen. So it looks like I'm a natural at it, but I really am not. It takes a tremendous amount of effort for me to be here on the stage, for me to speak up in meetings that are challenging and to put forth a point of view. But then I look at the alternative of if I didn't speak up today, what would have happened? And if I didn't stick up for somebody, what would have happened? And I think the consequences of not doing it are so much worse that it actually just energizes me to get it done. And so, and then it makes you, I think then the next step is, but gosh, was I too aggressive? And then you go through all of that, and then you just can't do that because you just have to assume that through the course of these many, many years, there will be good moments and there will be bad moments, but in the end, you'll just get better and better at it. So to not let the everyday get in the way of the long-term goal that you have.
I would just add, I think something that Angela said earlier about authenticity is so important. I think it's always a mistake to say, I'm going to have to show up and be someone other than who I am. But if you recognize a gap between the confidence that you should feel and project and what you do feel and project, just take it in a stepwise way. Can I challenge myself to not apologize in the meeting for what I don't know, but to say, it's a great question, we don't have that data today, let me circle back on that, as opposed to, I'm really sorry we didn't look at that. I always, for women I mentor, say, can you take the word just out as a qualifier for where you're better? I just believe. No, you think. You believe, right? You don't need to qualify it. What are those little micro steps you can take that inch you toward projecting greater confidence in a way that feels authentic to you? I think that sometimes baby steps are easier.
Yeah, well said. Well said.
Well, one more question. Oh, it's great. Yes, Scott. We'd love to hear from a male ally.
Oh, thank you. I am one. Thank you. My question is kind of simple, but I hope it's not asking too much, which is, if you look forward into the future, what are some of the things that you hope to see in the leadership rooms, and what would kind of surprise you in a positive way from, it's not just for men, but in general, to be more supportive? And how do you see things changing for the better, and what could some of the advocates do to help get there?
Yeah. I mean, very simply, it's about, being in a room where that room reflects every aspect of society, like the people that you would see every day, and that the people that you would want to be with every day, and it shouldn't feel or look different. So I use that as an example, but one really specific example that I can use is, think about boards, big giant public boards in America that, by the way, drive a lot of the decisions in some of the largest corporations in America. Like, they can be massively influential, but if you look at boards of public companies, how diverse are they? And it's questionable. And so if you think about what that looks like at the tippy top, then you can just imagine what it looks like the level down, and so on and so forth, right? And so I imagine a world where at the highest levels of corporate America, that looks like everybody, every part of America. And that when that happens, then I think we will have workplaces and cultures and communities that really celebrate the communities that we live in. Like, they actually look like where we live and work, as opposed to we drove somewhere to work and it has no resemblance to how we live our lives. And so I think that is one. I think, like what Christine said, some of the structural limitations to getting greater representation of all communities in certain types of jobs, that would be one to bring down. But to do that takes super intentional actions, like intentional. Like, we have to stay on it. We have to hardwire certain changes in our hiring processes or the way we interview or whatever it is, like hardwire to make it happen, because it is really that easy for it to not happen. And so that force against it, right, to drive change and to be positive and to see that impact that you want, requires everyone, every single day.
I would just add, especially for male allies, when you see some of the behaviors that are sort of classically pointed out in the workplace, a woman's had her hand up and 3 other men have been called on before she was a woman. Is Avak still here? I saw Avak earlier. I'm not sure if he had to walk out. But I had a female colleague, senior colleague, tell me not long ago she'd made a point in a meeting, and then a few minutes later, a man made a point, and Avak said, well, kind of like the point so-and-so made, right? And how much that meant to her to have someone else in the room in a position of power say, someone else said that smart thing a few minutes ago, let's not forget that. And so I think all of us can do that. All of us probably do that. But for those men who see those behaviors happening, just taking that minute to make sure, Melissa's had her hand up for a while, or I think that point this very much connects to the point so-and-so made. It's easy to do, and I can't tell you what a difference it makes. My last point would be, in answer to your question, I think it's much more normalized now than even early in my career to talk about the juggle with family, to say comfortably, I'm heading to a parent-teacher conference, I'll come back if I can, otherwise I'll be online. But as men are doing that more and more, I think it makes it easier for us all to do that, which I think is just easier as we all try to balance families and work.
And Christine, I want to double click on what you said. It's just so important because I think when your question is one that could be so immense, but actually, in order to address it, it's something that every single one of us can do every single day. Like, change happens, and things can move in a very different direction if every single one of us, like, can't be a few of us doing all of it. It's going to be every single one of us doing something every single day. Like, that's when, things change. It's the collective power of an organization that is all driving in the one direction, and that individuals count in this matter, right? It doesn't have to be Flagship doing something. It's every single one of us can do something every day. Like, that's when it can be really powerful.
An example of those of us just taking the reins and doing something every day is a women's health conference symposium being planned by some of the young scientific leaders here at Flagship. So I'm going to ask Aisha and Erica and Sarah to come up and talk about that. But first, let me please join me in thanking Angela for a terrific talk.